Hi, my name is Elizabeth Kripe. I'm the executive director and co-founder of Malachi's Message. Welcome to another episode of Malachi's Message, Toxic Mold Sucks. Co-hosting today is Emily Rochelle. She currently serves as our board chair, and she's also the co-founder of the organization. We are so excited. We have been waiting to hear from this guest, and it has finally worked out. Shelley Federico is with us today. Shelley, thank you so much for coming on today.
And good morning. How are you, ladies?
We're excited. We're super pumped for this.
Yay.
We're so excited.
We are. Not that we're not ever excited, but we are. We're pumped for this. So we want to give people a little bit of a background. We know a lot about you. We've come to love you. I remember my first conversation with you. I literally went to see if I could make you a shirt that said Mold Yoda on it to send it to you. And my husband, he's like, you were like dying laughing on that call. Who was that? I'm like, oh, it's a new best friend. We're good. Don't worry about it. But Shelley, for those of you that don't know her, in the fall of 2010, Shelley moved to Norfolk, Virginia with her family, where her husband was to be stationed. They were placed into the Lincoln Military Housing Complex. Within a year, they knew something was terribly wrong. The illnesses they began to experience pointed to a possible mold infestation. After testing revealed several toxic mold strains, Federico contacted any attorney who specialized in mold cases, who eagerly took her case. And we just get to hear more about this today.
Yes, it was quite a story, to say the least. But, just by the grace of God, I have been able to really understand about mold. And understand the conditions that I lived in. And I think when you know better, you do better. And kind of moving forward, and with my own situation, figuring out, why I was so sick and what that really looked like. And then realizing that it wasn't just about me, it was about my neighbor and her neighbor and down the street. And it just kept going. And I've been at this journey now 12 years, and what started out as one or two in a local market of Virginia Beach is now across the country at almost every military installation that you can plausibly think of. And we sit here kind of in ruins, but there are many of us that have banded together to understand what is happening, understand the way that these contracts are devised within the military, and what we can do about it to advocate together. I think one of the greatest things that I have seen through all of this travesty is so many people linking arms and really getting together the information that they need to address the situation as a whole, whether it's the health aspect of it, whether it's truly what's happening in military housing, what that looks like for the congressional side of it, and these contracts, and having to maneuver through all of those things when you're just a simple military housewife is kind of mind-boggling, and but I've just seen so many of them really rise to the occasion, and stand up and advocate and pay it forward for the next girl. I see that quite a bit. And it's kind of a magical thing in the middle of a mess. There's just been this magical transformation that has taken hold of my life, and people around me. And it's just a beautiful thing to watch that, you wouldn't think that you would come out of literally being on death's door to rising from the ashes from the miry pit and moving forward to help the next person. I think I've kind of understood that from the onset of that. This isn't just about a me problem. This is a we problem. And it's big. It's really big. But we're making headway. We've had, some congressional hearings happen. We've had House bills that have taken off. We have had awareness. We have had so much good in the middle of bad. So incredibly blessed to be able, for organizations like Malachi's Message, people networking together, really spreading the word about what SIRS looks like, what proper testing looks like, what proper remediation looks like, and just that network of just awesome people. I could not tell you how excited I am to network with you guys, and to be able to, change the narrative for so many people is a blessing within itself. And we watch that happen daily, and it just keeps, the numbers keep getting greater and greater of the people that pick up the phone and go, I just wanted to say thank you. I didn't know where I was in that journey, and my life looks completely different now. And oh, by the way, I had a conversation with someone and they had mold, and I was able to tell them what I learned. And, to me, that's where the magic of all of this really kind of takes shape, is watching people learn and grow and help others and pay it forward. I mean, I truly think that that's what's going to change the world when it comes to understanding about mold and mold sickness. It's going to take all of us talking about our stories and the things that happen, and what do we do, and how does that look different? And I think everybody's story is a little bit different, but yet there's still that common thread that runs through it. And that's, a lot of it is just not knowing and not understanding. But when you know, and you kind of can grasp it, it's kind of a cool thing to be able to plug and play that and help somebody else. So blessed to be able to do it. I'm blessed to have you guys.
Shelley, there was a very important moment, though, that really changed everything and opened the floodgates for all military families. And I remember hearing you speak about this moment. And one thing that I truly feel when I've spoken to you and I've heard your story, that God really chose you for a reason. There was a reason he chose you, and you actually heard. Well, I want you to kind of talk about that, because I feel like God has really been amongst a lot of us and has put us in this position to help others. But you went to a news station and you were about to leave. Can you talk to us about this very important moment that literally just shined the biggest spotlight on what is now a huge issue across the country that military families are finding out, which is their homes on base have a toxic mold problem, a lot of them.
Yeah. Oddly enough, I around that time, they had just come in to cut into my wall, and they tested. I had astronomical numbers. And when I say astronomical, I had 33,000 stachybotrys per cubic meter in my home that was on an air swab. But in that week's time, I was very confused. I was very sick. I was very disoriented. Something came over me. I was on my way to another doctor's appointment, and they were very frequent at that time, because I was so sick, and no one really understood why. But I was on my way, and I was in downtown Norfolk, and I don't know if you've ever been in Norfolk, but a lot of the streets are one way. And I was on my way to a doctor's appointment. I got turned around, and so I kept going around the same block. Like around the third time, I was like, okay, Lord, I give. So I had pulled in, and I was just trying to get my bearings about me and figure out where I needed to go. And so I pulled in, and I just started praying, and I was like, okay, I'm very confused, and I don't know what I need to do here. And I look across, and I see this 3-story building, and in big letters it said WTKR Channel 3 News. And I just kind of looked up at the sky, and I went, oh, you've got to be kidding me. And so it just kind of came over me, get out of your car and walk over there, Shelley. And so I did. And I walked over to the outside of the building. And I don't know if you've ever been to a TV station. I had never been before, but I'd walked to the door. And on the outside of the door, it has instructions. If you'd like to speak with someone, call this number, that type of thing. And then the door buzzed. And so I walked through the door. The door buzzed. And so I'm in between the first and the second door, and there's another plaque, and it's, gives you the information, and the door buzzed again. So I walked in. the second door. And no sooner than I had walked in, there was a receptionist sitting at the desk. And she said, "Oh, honey, I thought you were someone else. I'm not supposed to let you in. You can make an appointment. I really, truly thought you were another news reporter. I'm so sorry." Um, and so I looked at her and I said, "Ma'am, I don't know why I got through, but this is what's going on. And is there anyone I can speak with?" And she said, "No, they're all in meetings. There's no one that can help you." And so I said, "Okay." And I just remember the weight of the world being on my shoulders. And I just felt my shoulders just slump. And I turned around and I walked back towards the door. And I remember having my hand on the outside of the door. And I heard a woman's voice in the back of my mind. It was kind of muffled. And I turned around and I said, "Excuse me." And she said, "I said, sit down." And I said, "Well, yes, ma'am, I'll sit down." So she gets on the switchboard and she proceeds to start calling all over the news station to try to find someone that wasn't in this meeting. And she finally found someone. It was a news reporter by the name of Lori Simmons. And Lori came out, and I was literally halfway in the middle of the sentence. And I said, "I'm having a problem with Lincoln Military." And she said, "Housing." I mean, literally finished the sentence for me and said, "We have had so many reports of things happening, but no one's ever come forward to want to talk about it for fear of reprisal and retaliation." And I thought, what is she talking about? I thought this was like a secular thing. I didn't realize that this was about a greater swath of people. So that's kind of the introduction to the news story. From that, there was over 50 news stories that were conducted after my initial news story. That news story actually went on to win an Emmy Award for continuing coverage of what was happening in the military mold. And then from that, we went on to a national series to CNN. And, I really don't enjoy the news and all of these things, but I realized early on in the game that I had to bring attention and awareness for what was happening. From my news story, literally as it ran, the news reporter called me and said, "We can't even keep up with all of the emails and the phone calls that are coming through. Our news desk is completely inundated." And I just thought, wait, what? I didn't realize, and flash forward now to 12 years later, and there's not an installation I don't think that I haven't spoken with. And that's probably one of the saddest things I think I've said in a long time. This isn't just a one-off, a two-off, or even a three-off. This is in almost every installation that I can think of, all the way up to Alaska. People think that this is near water or near a warm state or something like that. I've got cases that are landlocked, and they're just as many cases of a landlocked base as a base that's near water. It is atrocious what is happening to our military families, the sicknesses that they're suffering. This has gone on for such a long amount of time that we are now starting to see multiple generations, what we call a legacy family, to where the children that would be the next in line to enlist are so sick that they can't even sign up when it comes to be their time. It is astronomical what the amount of people. It just seems sometimes that there's no end, to be very honest with you. We are facing things that no one should face. It's one thing to deal with mold and all of the health effects that come along with it, but it's another thing when you're dealing with part of the Department of Defense and public-private companies that are supposed to be maintaining these houses. And it's a struggle within a struggle. And it needs to stop, because we can't continue this way. I've said this many times in Congress, and I'll say it again. This is a matter of national security. And when we are too sick to defend this country and to defend these borders, it's going to be too late. And I know how sick I was. I couldn't even remember where I lived some days. I would find my keys in the refrigerator. So here we are sending men and women um, with loaded arms in their hands to go and defend this country. And it's a tragedy. It truly is. And until the day they put me in the ground and then some, I can assure you, I will do whatever it takes to bring awareness, to try to get this to change into whatever manifestation that I can get that to happen. The time is now, and I'm not letting off the throat of it. Either it's going to change or I'm going to change it, but something's going to change. And I have made myself that vow to the end.
Well, and it has already, right? Like, I hope you see that
Things have changed,
they
but
have,
yet they
like,
haven't. I still get calls. The amount of calls that I get weekly, and it goes like this. I spoke to someone who knew you, and this will be coast to coast. Just this past week, I got one on the East Coast. I got one on the West Coast within a Monday through Friday, Monday through 5 days, not 7, 5 days. I got a call from the East Coast. The girl happened to be on Instagram. The girl on the West Coast saw it, and the two linked together. And she said, call, I think Shelley can help you. And then the other one, it just keeps going and going and going and going. And the day that my phone stops ringing is when I know that real change is being made.
Yeah.
But it's really not. The retaliation that's happening, the painting over the mold, the using the bleach, the poor remediation, showing up with people that are not qualified to do testing, they're not qualified to do remediation, they're not following by the S520. We know that per our Tenant Bill of Rights that we got established through Congress, number 9 of the Tenant Bill of Rights states that it's supposed to be remediated by a professional through industry standards. And we know that the industry standard is the S520, but none of those things are being followed. So when you have shoddy remediation, you're setting yourself up for even more of a detriment to your health. So kind of like coming in and beating on the bees hive. Now you've got a big swarm. Before you saw the bee, you knew they were there, but now you've beat on it. And so now, we've got people that are displaced. They come back into their homes after 2-3 weeks. And then they're even sicker than what they started out with, right? Because we're not doing the proper things that need to happen. So then the intakes of the calls come in even more. It's kind of mind-boggling to me to think that a group of women can know more about remediation standards and understand that protocol than the very people who are funded and paid billions of dollars to have a contract to uphold to do this. To me, that's mind-boggling. How is it that I know more of the rules and I'm not paid for that job, but the people that are paid for that job act like the rules don't exist, and even when they do know the rules exist, they don't abide by them. And it's not abiding by those procedures is probably the thing that's gotten us in trouble more than anything, as far as the families. I know for me, they came into my house and there were no, when they came to remediate anything, there was no containment, there was no zero negative air pressure, there was nothing. So inadvertently, because those simple things weren't followed, I lost everything, every personal possession, baby books, wedding dresses, you name it. I mean, it all went to the dump because little things weren't done. And I think that's the thing that, when I realized that my things could have been possibly cleaned or remediated, salvaged to some degree, but because of someone's negligence in the way that they chose to come in and fix a problem, actually made it worse. And I think that's the thing that we all need to be really talking about more is, why do we have rules, right? Well, we have them for a reason, clearly, but they need to be followed, and they need to be followed to the letter, because when they're not, unfortunately, this is this is what happens. And, these military families, 2, 3, 4 children, we have quite a large population when it comes to military and them having children. We don't get paid a whole lot of money. A lot of them are right at what would be considered underfunded, I guess is a lack of a better word. It's sad. In the military, I think the misnomer is that you get all these great benefits and perks and health insurance and a place to live and all this stuff. But what people don't understand is it's really not the best of the best. And it's menial to say the least. But I've said this a million times before, is there's a different type of people that sign up for the military, and they're some of the most selfless individuals I've ever met in my life. To truly put their name on a dotted line to say that I will protect and defend the Constitution in the United States of America until I die, right? And I will take this solemn vow to do that. That's pretty selfless, so you're already dealing with a niche of people that are not like a lot of people. And then you take one more layer of that and you ask them to live in slum conditions. I think there's just, after a while, there's a tie to be bound on that, and you can't anymore. Like you physically are like, what's going on here? You look up and you see the conditions. In my instance, I called, I don't know how many times, dozens, and I only lived there 1 year. 1 year of my life changed the trajectory of the rest of my life. Oddly enough, 1 year. But it had such a significant backlash, really, to being there, that my life isn't the same, and I know that God chooses certain things for certain reasons. So I'm not going to be begrudging of those things and what he's chosen for me. I just think it's a travesty to watch it happen to so many, because these people are literally just so broken and so sick, and retaliated against so hard, for what? Because they spoke out about their living conditions. I mean, it's as I speak to these women, they say, Shelley, I don't understand. I'm just speaking about, what's happening in my family and the health conditions and the health of my home. Why am I retaliated against so hard? It's not like I'm trying to start trouble. I'm just trying to make sure that my family is a safe place to live. And I think that is the most mind-boggling thing, because any mother wants to make sure that our child lives in a safe, clean, dry environment. That's just kind of a standard, basic principle of life. And to have a basic need to be frowned upon and told, and basically that it's okay to live that way. It's okay for your children to be this sick. It's okay for the nosebleeds. It's not okay. And it wouldn't be okay for anyone that was on the other side of that coin. I've said many times, maybe they should make some of these public-private ventures that tell us that this housing is so great. Maybe they should come and live in said housing with their families, and stay about a year and let me know how you feel at the end of that year. Because I can assure you, you're not going to be in any better of a situation than anybody else is. It's not a matter of if it will make you sick. It's just a matter of when, and how bad you are exposed to certain types of molds. We know that they use them for biological warfare. The United States Army has written a paper stating that. And here we live on Army installations, Navy installations, Marine Corps installations, to where that's just a common thing. And there's nothing common about that. You shouldn't live in an area like that. So
that is mind-boggling to me, because as you're talking, I'm literally picturing like the kid that we support that's on our fridge. and we get reports on their community and how they're trying to make sure that their living conditions are dry and how their living conditions are clean. And you're saying this, and I'm going, so we're all sending money overseas to make sure people have good living conditions, and they're being retaliated on for the exact same thing that they will gladly say, oh, go support people overseas with this. But,
on American soil.
Yeah.
On
And
American
on
soil,
American
this is
soil.
happening. I
and
think
they're
that's
being lied to. And that's one of
Yeah.
the things that really, I don't
Mhm.
understand how these people sleep at night, but the inspector said they hire, the housing company, they hire an inspector to go in and say everything's fine. And from what we see, they don't even calibrate their machines when they even do the samples. So their results are going to be skewed anyways.
Well, this has gone for so long, and it's not a lack of, is it happening? We know that it's been reported widely. We know that Reuters did a wonderful job of really bringing that expose forward. Reuters is the whole reason that we were even able to get a congressional hearing going. We've had many congressmen and senators. We've had the Senate Armed Service Committee, the House Armed Service Committee. This spring, we had the Department of Homeland Security start with hearings at Fort Gordon and how bad it is. You can go online and just literally go to Google and type in military housing /mold or military housing / congressional hearings and watch it just come up. I mean, it's mind boggling. We know that it's happening. We know that our officials are informed of it. But the question is, why is it continuing? Why are they continuing to get away with this? Why aren't these contracts canceled? We know that they're 50-year contracts. If you're making that many people sick, if it's that well known, and you can pull up news articles. One of them was charged $65 million in fines because they were cooking the books. They were falsifying maintenance reports. They were caught by the Department of Justice. But yet these companies remain with these contracts. It makes no sense to me. I realize that they're embroiled in billions of dollars, and I understand that. But there has to come a stopping point to say, we are undoing the security of America because we can't get our housing situation. And you wouldn't think that those two would have anything to do with each other, but in this circumstance, they do. I just had last week helping a lady, her husband is deployed. Instead of just fixing the issue forward facing with the family, they tell the wife that your name isn't on the contract. They'll contact the husband who's deployed on another continent to take away from that mission ready of deployment to deal with the housing issue. Now tell me how that makes any sense, because it doesn't. You're calling somebody on a different continent to deal with something you don't want to deal with the spouse. Usually the spouse by that point is pretty upset. She's got a sick child, and their form of not dealing with it is just to say, hey, your name's not on the lease, and completely turn them away. And it happens. So
And that, makes no sense, because at that point, right, like the wife is, my husband's worked like months out of state, right? And I know for us, and it's not the same, but for us as wives, we take care of everything. Like That is our job, to make sure our husbands can be safe and do their job. That's how we ensure they're safe, by not putting anything else on them and taking care of everything at home. So these wives too are probably going, what the hell? Like, I'm supposed to be taking care of this. This is part of who I am and what my role is.
And then they try to take care of it. And usually it'll start off with, calling in maintenance issues, and they'll get it back. And it'll be this back and forth. But once it starts in with water intrusion or mold, I've seen people wait months to get any help, back orders. For me, for example, I'm not even speaking about anybody else. We'll speak about me. I had a window that was on back order for months. And they kept me in that house. It was leaking. There was a hurricane that came through with a leaking window. They still kept me in that house. Like it doesn't make any sense. And again, if you're paid all of this money to make an LLC, a contract with the government to provide housing, it would behoove you that you would understand how to take care of said housing, right? So that you could continue to do your job. That's not happening here. This is just money exchanging hands.
Yeah.
And nothing's really happening. And the thing about it is that, this isn't just money exchanging hands from one to another. This is running up our healthcare bill because we're constantly being treated for symptoms. We're not actually being diagnosed and treated in the right way. So it causes problems beyond problems, other than just a forward facing, I'm having an issue with my house, it's making me sick. This is a lifelong debilitating issue that if you don't get a handle on it, it's ruining everything. Literally, it's ruining the health of your family. It is setting up your children for failure in the future. I mean, I could go on. And it's senseless. It really is senseless. All of this can be fixed relatively easy. I think that's the thing that has kind of struck me more than anything. And in this whole time is that these are not hard fixes. These are not hard things to implement. If you can read, you probably can follow the rules, if I had to beg to differ. And if you can get $1 billion contract going with the government and you don't know how to read, then maybe you shouldn't have that contract. So we'll just go with that one. But if you can't facilitate any of those things, then maybe you shouldn't be on a military installation. And that's my 2 cents. This has come to the point where this isn't about name calling or those things. This is about get your shit together and get it together quickly. There are people that depend so greatly on these homes. In some installations, you can't live off of the installation. Right. You're forced to live in these conditions. And that is, people think that some of these things are a choice. This isn't always a choice. You've got bases like San Diego, right outside of DC, different markets. The BAH isn't high enough. The market is already, and we're looking at already an astronomical housing market right now, flipped upside down, right? Just to buy a house, to rent. It's crazy. So, it pushes these people back down, and they're set up to be communities that we live in. That's what we do. We live in these communities. It's different. We are a different niche of people. But they're not even able to be facilitated for what they were originally devised for. And that's to have everything that you need kind of on the confines of a base. There are people that I have seen will live with nothing before they have to go back and move into military housing. They've lost everything. They'll sleep on air mattresses. They'll do whatever to make sure that they never have to live on a military installation. And the sad thing is that we're seeing a trend to where it happens so often that you think, okay, well, it happened at this installation and it won't happen at the next one. And it just happening and going down the line over and over and over. And it's just sad. It's sad to watch. It's sad to watch the DOD try to help to some instances, and their hands are kind of tied. You look at Congress, they tell us that their hands are kind of tied with this situation, but yet they're not. So what's really going on? That's the question sometimes you ask yourself, like, this isn't really that hard. Like, why can't we fix this? And we can, but I just think it's going to take canceling contracts, starting all over, giving this back to the government and telling the government that the Department of Defense needs to take care of their own and their own housing. Because when you try to privatize things, it goes south. When you don't have anyone to oversee things, this is the culmination of what happens. Truly, it is.
Shelley,
Mm.
I want to circle back to your story, okay? Because seriously, it's God chose you. And hearing what you just said, I mean, if people aren't listening, this is a national security issue.
Yes, ma'am.
But you got an attorney who believes so much in you that he actually mortgaged his own home to keep your case going.
He did. He did.
Can you
So I started out,
talk
sure.
about that?
I originally trying to find an attorney called Over 50 and got about 50 phones slammed in my ear. They were like, at first people thought it was the government. And I can understand that because it is on federal property. They didn't want to touch that. They thought that, you can't sue the government, which, by the way, you can sue the government. But, there were so many people that just didn't want anything to do with it. And I incredibly blessed. David Bailey was my very first attorney. And it got kind of hairy at the beginning through many parts of this. I spent about 5.5 years in federal court. But when he did start out, it was a lot of barrels rolling downhill, paperwork, busy work, and inadvertently, to keep my case alive, he did mortgage his house. By the grace of God, I, to this day, still mind boggled. That's all I got to say. Mind boggled, because of that case now has opened the doors for thousands of military families. That case has opened the door for every American across this country. But God knew that, right? He knew that. He knew that going into all of this. And we didn't. And we just kept fighting and trying to move forward and do the right things. But he is good. He is so good. And the things that he has done through such tragedy and defeat, to rise up out of the ashes and to say that this isn't the end. There is hope. And networking with so many people, I'm just immensely blessed to be able to do that and to bring awareness and to spread the message. So sky's the limit where we go with this, guys. But I think that we're off to a pretty good start in changing the face of mold and bringing awareness into that space, not just military, but across the board to anyone.
Shelley's case, if people don't know, was the first case that ever proved that mold can cause brain damage, which is huge. People think that mold really isn't that serious, but she proved with her case that no, it can actually cause brain damage.
We were the first to ever prove that toxic mold can cause a brain injury. And also we were able to get some medical imaging. And I talk about this quite a bit as well. It's called a neuroquant. You can look it up, neuroquant neurogauge. And what it does is it shows a quantitative volume of the brain. What the doctors were able to do with not only my case, but the 14 cases behind me, is they were actually able to see that there are parts of the brain that aren't like a regular traumatic brain injury, that look different from what happens with mold, from the environmental side of that brain injury. And it's the same parts of the brain over and over that are affected. There's been peer review studies over it, papers that have been written. So this is no longer a he said, she said, does it. It's a very debilitating thing. It will slowly kill you. It will cause cancer. It will cause, there's multiple studies that are tied to brain injury from mold and dementia and Alzheimer's. A lot of people don't realize that a lot of those things are so interconnected. And it starts with environmental. We take 20,000 breaths almost a day. And that's a defining basis of how your body really functions, right? From just what you breathe. And it'll take your life.
What do they say? The importance of the threes, that you can go without food for 3 weeks, you can go without water for 3 days, you can't go without air for 3 minutes. And that's how critical, the air in your indoor environment is,
and for it to be clean as well.
Yeah.
Not, yeah, it is so, so vital. And I think a lot of people, the sad thing about mold is this, is because you can't, until it colonizes, you really can't see it. You don't understand what's happening in front of you. You don't see those spores. A lot of them are microscopic. You don't understand, why it is that you're feeling the way that you do. A lot of times it's hidden in a wall cavity, underneath a sink, in an HVAC closet, right? And so you kind of rack your brain in, I remember when I moved to Virginia and everyone kept telling me, oh, it's the weather. You just moved from Hawaii. You need to acclimate yourself to the climate. You're on the East Coast. Things are different for you. And so I thought that truly that's what it was. I thought, okay, well, it's just going to take us a while, until I started seeing my stepdaughter come around the corner with nosebleeds. That would be, every third day. And then they got to be like every other day. And then it was just like a couple of times a day. And I was like, okay, I've never seen your nose bleed before. And not only is it bleeding, but it's like every day. What's going on? Odd things. I think the day for me, though, that I really understood something wasn't right was the day I found my keys in the refrigerator. I to this day, of all of the things that have happened to me, I think that one was, what is going on? Like, I was just so and the crazy thing is, I got to the point where I had to start retracing my steps. Okay, how do I find my wallet? Okay, where did I put my phone? If I wasn't on my phone and asking for my phone, and I know that that's sometimes, haha, we do that. But when I started finding my keys in the refrigerator was when I was like, okay, this is so far out of the norm. Like, that, what? I remember my ex-husband calling me on the phone. This is a Marine, couldn't find his car, was so just distraught because he couldn't find his car. To this day, I remember my ex-husband driving by our house every single day. And I'm like, where are you going? And seeing him drive by, it got to the point where I say this as a ha-ha, because if you don't cry about it, you laugh about it. But I had to put a flag in front of our house. I put a Marine Corps flag and said, boom, this is where you live, so that he would not keep driving by the house. It's the things that you have to do just to get by. That's when I realized something wasn't quite right. So yeah, it has been an uphill battle. But here we are, and I'm grateful for air in my lungs. I'm grateful for clean air in my lungs. I'm grateful for the opportunity to change the narrative for my brothers and sisters that are in the military. But I'm most grateful to be able to change the narrative for mold and what that looks like, to really bring awareness to a whole different level. Mold should be no different than we know about smoking or asbestos or anything else. We know that all those things are cancer causing, and we try to avoid those. Mold needs to be, in as far as awareness wise, needs to be on that same platform, because it causes so many illnesses. And all of these things could be avoided to some degree if we could just bring that knowledge forward of what that looks like, and let this be something that we know how to address. We know that we don't clean bleach with mold, or clean mold with bleach. We do things a little bit different. We don't paint over it. We get it remediated, right? We take care of the issue instead of hiding the issue, I think, is what we should all learn from this, because it won't go away, and it'll keep growing, and it'll get worse. And you have to remove that. You have to take care of it. It's no different than if you had gangrene and your leg was rotting off. You wouldn't just put a Band-Aid over and keep moving, because eventually that's going to spread to the rest of your body. That's the same analogy of what happens to a house. So you've got to remove that area. You've got to remediate that area of your body. So that it gives the rest of your body a fighting chance to get well. That's kind of how I look at it, is same. So knowledge. We've really got to have that deck plate level to where we understand why we don't use bleach. We understand why we don't paint over it. We understand that if we go to remediate it, that, we should have PPE gear on, little things that we need to be learning along the way. Once upon a time, we thought smoking was okay, and we smoked on airplanes, right? Now we know that it causes cancer, right? But it took some time. And I feel like that mold is kind of on that very next wave of things. Bringing forward, we see that happening in court cases. So, usually when there is a legal standard behind things, sometimes it kind of pushes that forward to where it brings awareness. Back in the day, when you bought a pack of cigarettes, it didn't say on the side of them can cause cancer, but it does now, right? So it's the same ideology that we have to bring that forward. We have to talk about it. We have to talk about it with our family and friends. And sometimes that can be an uncomfortable conversation. Oh, by the way, but be who you are, be true to your roots. There are people out there that are going through this and don't even realize it.
I love how,
Hmm.
sorry, I'm cutting you off.
No, you're fine.
I love how you mentioned that the doctors or the people are trying to tell you that you just needed to acclimate to the new area. Like Elizabeth, when she moved to Houston, like me, when I moved to Livingston, where our toxic mold exposures happen, we were told it's just a new area. You just got to give it time, acclimate, different allergens. And
well, by that time, I had been going to the doctor so often. I had going back and looking at it, I was on a 6-month window of back to back steroids and antibiotics. Like, no one should be on that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh,
Shelley froze. But that's what happened to you, Elizabeth.
That's exactly. My daughters now can't take very specific antibiotics because they had it like she had for 6 months, back to back, and their bodies are totally immune to them now. And I can't take antibiotics at all really anymore because of autoimmune conditions from mold. And I get like super, super ill if I take antibiotics. My body can't handle it anymore.
Shelley's still frozen. Shelley.
Well, Shelley, we want to say thank you, and we are excited. We're going to have a 2-part episode podcast with Shelley. So in the next one, we're going to find out what she's doing now and where she's landed and how she is changing so many lives through various roles and entrepreneurial, I guess. Yeah, that's a good word for it. Businesses that she started. So please come back next week and we're going to hear more about Shelley Federico and what she is doing today.